the tech here at Tommy's Guitar Shop. I guess I do a little bit more than the tech work, kind of do a bunch of different stuff, but primarily I focus on the repair of guitars.
How on earth did you end up starting down this field?
Oh my God, necessity, honestly. Poor background, so paying for setups, various works here and there for an up-and-coming kit wasn't really something that I could do. So, I partnered with some of my friends that I started making over at Hot Licks. It's a store that used to be down the street. They kind of showed me the ropes, and from there I kind of snowballed into doing all my own setup work, and eventually just kind of landed doing it here. Ended up touring in the early 2000s, had a little metalcore screamo band. Taking my guitar on the road meant that I had to do a lot more maintenance on it, couldn't afford a technician. I started doing my bass player's guitar as well as my secondary guitar player's guitar. And from there I started picking on more friend guitars, and eventually, Tommy and I talked about it, and that's kind of the steps I took.
What would you say in a standard guitar setup is the thing that people get the most wrong or are the most mystified by?
Honestly, truss rod work or nut saddle work. Two things that are really easy to mess up, but very easily replaceable. I mean, not the truss rod, but adjusting the truss rod is the one thing I see people do wrong the most. They overcompensate by adjusting it too much, or they're just too afraid to do it. That said, the nut work I see is a big one, a big culprit for guitars going out of whack. A lot of players that buy a new instrument will, start changing the strings on their own, not thinking that strings act as like a serrated edge on that nut. So eventually they cut them down after 2 or 3 reed strings, and then they got a broken guitar and it sits and sits unless they bring it in here. I know that there's some luthiers and techs in the area that end up having different, varying opinions on what's worth it or not. I come from, again, a poor background, so I try to treasure the things that I have, whether that's some old Yamaha classical, which was my first guitar that I, for some reason, still have, that I've had to, do a neck reset on it myself. Maybe not the best, but still did it. Really driving out the mentality of guitars and instruments as trading cards, I think, is very important. For me, I look at my instrument as a tool, like my main few guitars. I don't necessarily have what I would consider like an emotional attachment to them, but I do, they're my tool. I look at it that way. That way, when I pick it up, I know that it's going to be fun time. I have an early 90s Jackson Dinky from Japan that I picked up that got a lot of stage time, and I don't remember the exact reason why. And I was like, cool, I'm not going to use that thing for a while. I've already got these other guitars. Then after a while, I was like, it's actually a really cool guitar. What the heck? What was I thinking? I didn't appreciate it. And then the price skyrocketed, and now they're unobtainium. So my cheap $200 guitar that I'll never get again. We had a old Jet Glow Rickenbacker that came to us for whatever we could do to it. I guess it had been through a fire, but I suspect it also may have been through a bit of flooding just based on the wear and gunk that had built up in a certain way. Oh man, I spent the better part of 2 days just disassembling every tiny bit to make sure that, whatever gunk was in there was gone. I felt really good about how that came out, but it came to us just literally you could not see the finish. It was just this layer of sewage. We ended up, I took a heater blanket type thing, not a safety blanket, but like a fire blanket. Wrapped the neck up, got out my heat gun, and kind of put the neck back a little bit to normal. Tommy took the rest of that and fixed up some of the electronics, brought it back to us, and fire waterlogged guitar into a perfectly playing intonated instrument. I was really happy about that one.
What do you think are some of the best production guitars right now?
I think a lot of the Rev Stars from Yamaha are probably the best ones, in my opinion, mostly because of the accoutrements that they each have. Yeah, I have to say it that way. You know, right from the Element series, which are these little dudes there. You know, they're built the same as the next step up, just, you know, maybe lower quality woods and stuff. They don't use stainless steel frets, but for $500, you get a giggable instrument that has a very high-end electronic system. You know, having P90s that you could end up splitting in like this weird out-of-phase thing. Just so many features of these instruments for under $1,000 that most other brands like Ibanez don't do. That said, Ibanez does have, somewhere around here, their AZ series of instruments, which come right in at the $300 to $400 range. They're HSS. They've got those vintage necks on them. They're built really well in some pretty cool colors. I'd say these are, you know, if you don't want like an SG shape, one of these AZs would probably be the way to go. Coolest guitar in the shop. That one's really tough. I have my eye on this old ES-140. That's this like little 3/4 size with a T-bonnet in the neck. I keep finding myself reaching up and grabbing it and jamming around on it. Iteration of the Iceman that came out. They've done some cool things, bringing back the old, what are those, trapezoidal inlays, as well as the flying finger pickups. They look, sound, and play as well as like any of the older models, despite being made in China. I've been jamming out on them quite a bit. They're pretty cool.